Hi guys, it's Kayla, or Moon, or the owner of this totally uncontroversial YouTube channel. What's up? I'm sure you've read the title, so you know why we're here. KinnPorsche. Beyond Cloud's magnum opus, a series so divisive that it's become synonymous with one word: romanticization. If you've watched my video analyzing Tarn Type and its portrayals of abuse and consent, you'll know this is a topic I feel very strongly about. I believe that media and messages in media matter. I also believe that creative expression should not be suppressed. And so, today's analysis isn't going to be, we don't want to see sensitive topics in BL. Instead, it's going to be, we want these sensitive topics to be treated with the respect they deserve. So the question we're trying to answer: does KinnPorsche romanticize abuse, specifically rape and sexual assault? This has been a huge point of contention within the BL community, and oftentimes people lean towards one extreme or the other. The thing about media critique is that there isn't typically a right or wrong answer. However, I'm going to try my best to break down each side so that you can make your own decision. Discussion is so essential when it comes to topics like this, so I hope I can offer a unique perspective. Since my degree is in broadcast production and media management, I will be focusing on both the content of the series and the way it's been marketed. Without further ado, let's begin. The first relationship I want to explore is Kinn and Porsche. These two met and developed feelings for each other in an unconventional way. Kinn is the son of a mafia boss, and he has the attitude to match. By nature, he's toxic. I don't think there's any debating that. He uses his intel to track down Porsche and force him to be his bodyguard. Now, Porsche is a person who doesn't take orders from others. Similar to Kinn, he's hard-headed, but his desperation to provide for his brother leads him to the major family's doorstep. Inherently, there's nothing healthy about Kinn and Porsche's dynamic, which is to be expected from a series involving organized crime. The real issue people have with this relationship revolves around consent and the way it's depicted. In episode 4, Porsche is drugged and kidnapped during a mission. The mastermind behind this scheme is Vegas, the oldest son of the Minor family. He has a vendetta against Kinn's side of the family and wants to assert his dominance by raping his bodyguard. Of course, this doesn't end up happening, but what comes next is quite polarizing. Kinn brings Porsche back to the house and tries getting him to shower, an objective that fails miserably. Porsche is tripping off gamma hydroxybutyrate, or GHB for short. It's like ecstasy. So as he's high on this drug, he starts coming on to Kinn, groping him and saying, "Oh, you want to see me naked, you like me, don't you?" And Kinn keeps pushing him away even as he tries kissing him. Eventually, he goes along with it and the rest ensues. Now everybody, say it with me: somebody who is under the influence cannot give consent. Although Kinn was reluctant at first, he did take advantage of Porsche's vulnerability, and I think we can all agree that was wrong for him to do. Now, the part that we have to analyze is the aftermath. The sensitive topic of consent and inebriation was depicted. Now, how does the series handle it? In episode 5, we see Porsche in bed, staring despondently into space while Kinn's speaking to him. He remembers what happened between them last night, and he feels nauseated by the circumstances. He goes through the motions of his daily training, but he's unable to get the images out of his head. At one point, he finds himself in the bathroom, trying to process his emotions. He's so confused, because he has feelings for Kinn, but his boundaries were crossed in a big way. Later on in the episode, he tries hooking up with a woman at the bar, but his mind keeps replaying what happened with Kinn. While he's out, he runs into Vegas, who offers him a ride. And when he arrives back at the house, Kinn is furious. He scolds him for mingling with the minor family who cannot be trusted. Porsche takes the opportunity to call out Kinn's hypocrisy. He says to him, "At least they've done me no harm." Kinn responds, "Are you saying that I've hurt you?" And Porsche inquires, "Or have you not?" This is when Kinn reiterates that he's the boss and that he owns Porsche's life. "I can do whatever I want," he says. And to that Porsche replies, "Then go ahead, come on, do it. What the heck are you waiting for?" They provoke each other because it's easier than confronting the issue. Still, we can recognize that Kinn's in the wrong and Porsche is a victim. After this exchange, they aren't given much time to reflect because they're kidnapped by Vegas's people and must fight to escape. They end up in the wilderness, handcuffed to each other, survival taking priority. And it's while stranded that Kinn finally confronts what he did. "I'm sorry," he says, "about that night. I'd never crossed the line with any bodyguard before. I don't know how I should place myself. I've done so many bad things to you. If I could turn back time, I would not do things like that to you." Porsche replies, "I don't know how I should place myself too. No one has ever crossed that line with me before." Kinn asks for forgiveness, and Porsche tells him that he forgave him a long time ago. This scene is so important because it acknowledges that what Kinn did was wrong and warranted an apology. They don't try to convince you otherwise with the use of comedic sound effects, music, or other techniques that influence mood. The narrative is framed as serious and thoughtful as opposed to this glossed over depiction of a non-consensual act. And the consequence that comes from this is Kinn having to prove that he's changed and account for the things he's done to Porsche. As for the marketing of episodes 4 and 5, Beyond Cloud shared an infographic about GHB and the harmful effects of the drug. This is important as well because it pushes back on the glamorization of drugs and demonstrates an understanding of how crucial education is. From a production and marketing standpoint, this part of the series does not align with the romanticization of abuse. I personally felt that it did justice to a sensitive topic and, unfortunately, one that's all too common. Like I said, Kinn and Porsche don't have the healthiest environment to begin with. So from here you might ask yourself, should the mafia be romanticized? You could get into this separate discussion about the way that organized crime is depicted in the media and the ethics behind that, but I'm just here to talk about the topic at hand. The second relationship I want to explore is Vegas and Pete. So Pete, being Kinn's most trusted bodyguard, is assigned with the task of spying on Vegas. Their first major interaction is in episode 7 when Pete is sneaking around the Miner family's house and accidentally runs into Vegas. We don't see them interact again until episode 9 when Pete is caught spying on Vegas and his brother at the Buddhist temple. Although these are the first encounters we see between the characters, it's heavily alluded to them having some type of history or Pete having more intel on Vegas than he's letting on. Either way, he knows the man has a sadistic personality. The novel readers will tell you that Vegas is indisputably evil, and he does a lot of things in the novel that simply can't be adapted into a live-action series. He's that bad. So, from a production standpoint, the difficulty here would be, how do we portray the dynamic between Vegas and Pete with the knowledge that Vegas's character must be toned down for broadcast? During this transition, the screenwriters and directors have to get creative in order to fill those gaps in characterization and plot. And I'll just say it. Vegas is a poorly written character. For many people, this is where the issue lies, because poor writing leads to characters doing things that are out of character. Overall, it hurts the story and its pacing. The Vegas and Pete storyline as we know it doesn't start until the end of episode 10, when Pete is kidnapped and tortured by Vegas. This scene is important because it establishes their dynamic as captor and captive and leads into the events of episode 11. At first, Vegas intends on killing Pete, but quickly changes his mind. He tells him, "When you suffer, you seem to be more interesting." All the while, Pete is insisting that he just kill him. As this is happening, Vegas's dad storms into the room, reprimanding him for the mess he's caused and ordering him to get rid of Pete. Defiant towards his father and intrigued by his hostage, he decides to bring Pete to his family's safe house as a pet. To clear up suspicion over Pete's whereabouts, he threatens to harm his grandmother, a prospect that gives him no choice but to play along. Once they arrive at the safe house, Vegas chains Pete up in a locked room. The physical abuse happens soon after when Pete refuses to eat the food that Vegas brought him. Enraged, Vegas takes off his belt and starts beating him with it, leaving gashes on his body before exiting the room. Noticing that he left the belt within reach, Pete grabs it, using its prongs to pick the handcuff lock. Freeing himself, he rams the door until it opens and tries to escape the compound. Unfortunately, they're far from the city and Vegas resorts to tasing him. Later on in the episode, we see Vegas's dad reprimanding him once again and telling him, "In this life, you'll never be able to beat Kinn." The comparison sets Vegas off, and he goes back to the room, where he finds Pete unresponsive. Terrified by the thought of being left alone, he tends to his wounds and tries giving him medicine. Again, Pete refuses, saying, "Just let me die." And this prompts Vegas to feed him the pill from his own mouth. This one gesture sparks a change in Pete's perception of Vegas, along with the realization that their fathers both beat them growing up. This detail is crucial to understanding Pete's empathy towards Vegas. Statistically, people who are abused by their parents are more susceptible to abuse later down the line. According to leaders in developmental science, this is because trauma rewires the nervous system, putting the victim in a constant state of fear and guilt. So that's why we see a visible change in the way that Pete interacts with Vegas. Additionally, Pete starts to develop Stockholm Syndrome, which is a coping mechanism for people who are held in captivity. According to the Cleveland Clinic, the victim will develop positive feelings towards their captor over time. The reason why I'm including this research is to show you that Pete's feelings and future actions make sense in terms of characterization and storytelling. As we move into episode 12, we see Pete acclimating to his captivity, even feeling comfortable enough to joke with Vegas. However, the threat of Vegas's temper is always present. Later on in the episode, Pete wakes up to see Vegas distraught, his beloved hedgehog dying. Hopelessly, he wanders into the yard, knowing that he can't do anything to save it. This gives Pete a second chance to escape, and he picks the lock, running out the door. But something stops him. In the distance, he spots Vegas, crying on the ground. The empathy he has for his captor kicks in, leading him to approach the man and try consoling him. Together, they bury the hedgehog, returning to the room. Curiously, Vegas asks him, "Why didn't you run away?" And Pete answers, "I don't even know." Vegas leaves it alone, reflecting on his own life instead, questioning why he was born into a family that always comes second. It angers him, and he starts hitting himself. Pete tries getting him to stop, which makes him even angrier. That anger slowly turns to fascination when he sees Pete's reaction. He says to him, "Every time I get moody, your eyes tell me that you like it." Now here's the part that's up for analyzing. Vegas tells Pete that it's no fun if he doesn't give in, and this is when Pete grabs Vegas, kissing him. The rest ensues. Some viewers interpreted Pete's reciprocation as giving consent, but consent is non-existent when somebody is being held against their will. Already, Vegas has abducted Pete from his usual environment and is trying to break him psychologically. So the argument that Pete was a willing participant doesn't correspond with the narrative, and it reinforces the rape myth that a victim was asking for it. The sensitive topic of abuse and Stockholm Syndrome was depicted. Now, how does the series handle it? This is where I falter, because I never once interpreted Vegas and Pete's relationship as romantic, and I think a large percentage of the fandom does. When I reacted to the series on Patreon, I went back and forth, trying to figure out what narrative they were going with. In the fandom, one side was saying, "They're disgusting for making this," and the other side was saying, "This is for adults, go cry about it." I hated both sides of that coin because it was either this puritanical cleansing of LGBTQ+ media or this rejection of intellectualism and critical thought. And as I mentioned earlier, media critique doesn't necessarily have a right or wrong answer. Still, I desperately want to answer this question. Does Vegas Pete romanticize abuse? So now that we have an understanding of what motivates Vegas and Pete as characters, let's take a look at 3 different scenes that could point to the romanticization of abuse. The first 2 are from episode 11, and they're quite similar in nature. When Vegas brings Pete to the safe house, there's a scene where he starts talking to his hedgehog. He tells the caged animal, "When you're free, tell Pete to be a good pet." Simultaneously, a familiar instrumental is playing in the background. It's the same instrumental that's used during several of the comedic scenes throughout the series. Nothing more happens in that scene, but it could be interpreted one of 2 ways. Either the tone is meant to emphasize how ridiculous Vegas is being in that moment, or the tone is meant to humanize him by showing that he's capable of caring. There's another scene where Vegas brings Pete ramen, and Pete questions if it's poisoned before scarfing it down. Again, they use that instrumental. I wasn't sure how the tone was meant to be interpreted here other than showing that Vegas is capable of caring. So when it comes down to these 2 scenes, you have to ask yourself, is this series romanticizing Vegas's behavior by humanizing him? Moving on to what I would consider the strongest evidence of romanticization is the after credits scene in the final episode. Like 50 Cent, Vegas got shot about 9 times and survived. So in this scene, we see him recovering, while his brother and Pete are keeping him company. Although Pete sticking around isn't the healthiest choice, it's something that makes sense for his character. He escaped long ago, but he's mentally trapped. Vegas asks him, "Why are you still here?" Pete replies, "I can't run off anywhere." Assuredly, Vegas says, "If you run now, I'm all right with that." And Pete insists that he's following his heart by staying. "From now on, you're no longer my pet," Vegas says. "You're the most important person in my life." They kiss, and the scene ends with Pete, Vegas, and his brother hugging each other. Where do I begin? This has to be the most nonsensical conclusion I've ever seen in a BL. I don't even feel angry. I just feel confused. How did we get from the Minor family slaughtering all of Pete's colleagues to them now taking care of Vegas with 0 repercussions? How did they forgive him? How do they feel safe? He suffered one consequence, and that was losing everything. But he didn't lose everything. He still has Pete, who he kidnapped, abused, and manipulated. His father may be dead, but with that comes freedom. So really, he gained more than he lost. This ending scene is so poorly written because it doesn't align with the story, the characters, the mood, or the setting. Based on that finale, how does this make sense? From a marketing standpoint, Vegas and Pete are tricky because their characters are not in a romantic relationship, but Bible and Build have to promote the series as a BL pairing. So as the consumer, you have to ask yourself, am I taking a stance for or against these issues by consuming these promotions? It's like when you eat at Chick-fil-A because the food's good, but you know the CEO donates to conversion therapy. Is it ethical to promote these characters in a romantic way when their story is anything but? Listen, I don't even know if I agree with this marketing tactic being problematic. However, it's definitely something to consider when looking at the bigger picture. Before I wrap up this video, I want to address why it is that I put some of the blame on the fandom when it comes to romanticizing abuse in KinnPorsche. As the series was airing, I witnessed things that had my jaw on the floor. I will never forget seeing sexy edits of Porsche being roofied and assaulted. I will never forget seeing edits of Vegas getting Porsche drunk set to a Weeknd song. For me, these are the instances of romanticization. This is the disrespect. In the past, I've compared it to the manhwa Killing Stalking and how the author begged people to stop shipping the characters romantically, which resulted in everybody saying, "Fuck you, we're doing it anyway." Granted, the KinnPorsche authors are absolute garbage, and a live-action series has several moving parts. So at the end of the day, the question remains, does KinnPorsche romanticize abuse? Hell, I don't know. But I hope I was able to provide you with the resources to make your own decision. Thank you to the moon and back for watching. I mean it. The topic of abuse romanticization is one that I have to place myself in a triggering position to discuss, but I feel that discussion is a must for BL fans and fans of any genre really. Please share your thoughts with me in the comments and please be respectful while doing so. You guys know the drill. Again, thank you for tuning in and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye!